Hello. After a 4-month absences, we just realized we are back with AMP Talks. This is number 16. This season, we're gonna change things a little bit. We're gonna focus on also on specific festivals. And we thought the best one to begin with is New York Asian Film Festival. It's just ended. Okay, it didn't just end it, but it ended some time before. But since it's probably, if not the biggest, definitely one of the biggest in the world in terms of ASEAN cinema, so we thought it would be a great occasion to start with that. Regarding this year's edition, Rhythm, what's your take?
Yeah, I think it was a nice mix. It had lots of commercial cinema that, very recent blockbuster type films that were supposed to be coming out that had just come out in, their respective countries. It also had a few indies in there. Obviously, they opened with a screening of New Dragon Inn, which was also an interesting idea and a very fun film to kick things into gear. So overall, I think it was a nice mix of titles in there, and definitely something that was very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. In general, I guess New York Asian Film Festival does that. I mean, they focus more on mainstream, but you can find in their program older classics and modern films, and it also shows in the way they have their guests and they give their awards. Like this year, there was a tribute with An Hui, which I had the pleasure of interviewing, and then there was an award to Yosuke Ikematsu. You can find these interviews in our YouTube channel and on the website. Don, regarding the horror films in New York Asian Film Festival, what's your take?
I really can't give too much because I didn't really see that there was a big selection. There was probably only maybe 2 or 3 that I would have considered genre fair, but I would have loved to have gotten to them, but they were unavailable by the time I got to them. So all I can really comment on is I can echo Rhythm's statement about the blockbuster titles that were available. It was actually kind of nice to see a festival that had titles like that available that we were able to watch. Not that I have anything against indies, but sometimes every now and then you want to have a title that you actually want to talk about and want to watch. So it's not that I have anything against indies, but every now and then you want to have something that you actually like and want to talk about. And I really appreciate that was provided for us.
Yeah. I do agree with that actually, because a couple of films, specifically Korean films, that I was really looking forward to watching. NIAF had them even before they had screened in their country, and these were big titles that even the local people were looking forward to. So, that was a good surprise and a welcome thing to have.
Okay, I agree, of course. And also to proceed, we're gonna focus on a couple of films that made the most impression on us. Okay, but the selection of NIAF is pretty big actually, but these are the ones that really stood out for us. Okay, a lot of them stood out, but we're gonna focus on a couple. So let me begin with Last of the Wolves by Kazuya Shiraishi. It's a sequel to Blood of the Wolves, which is a great film we saw back in 2018. Koji Yakuzo is not in this, but his character's presence is actually felt throughout. The story is based also on the novel by Yoko Yuzuki called Koru no Chi, and takes place 3 years after the events that happened in the first film. And Hyoka, who used to be a rookie in the first one, is not a rookie anymore and has actually followed on his mentor's which Sogogami was the role Koji Yakuzo had in the first one, which was his mentor of sorts, a bit strange mentor, but still. And Hyoka has really taken after him and trying to keep the peace between Odani Gumi and the Irakokai, two opposing Yakuza gangs. And in the process, he has also made a lot of money, and he has drawn attention to him by the rest of his police officers, and not exactly in a good way. Also, the bad blood with Saga, one of the higher ups who knew exactly what happened with Ogami, still exists. And when Hyoka is transferred to the police precinct Saga is in charge of, the pressure begins to pile up for the protagonist. And despite the fact that his new partner, veteran Takayuki Sessima, is rather helpful and even welcomes him in his house. The real issue, however, which threatens to throw the precarious balance Hyoka and the leaders of the two Yakuza factions have retained until now, is the release of Shigehiro Uebayashi, who is keen on revenge for his boss's death, and is willing to go to any extreme to achieve his goal, including fighting his own bosses. Also, there is another arc here, and as Hyoka in his exploitative ways forces a Korean immigrant named Kota to infiltrate Uebayashi's close circle by promising to give him a Japanese passport, which is a concept that complicates the whole situation even more. And also because Kota's sister owns a bar that is affiliated with Uebayashi's enemies. As you can expect, and as it happened in the first film, inevitably all hell breaks loose at some point. Okay, a few more things about the film. There are two great things here. The first one is the characters, with the transformation of Hyoka, who used to be an idealistic rookie, but has now become a cop who has fully adopted the corrupt but effective tendencies of his mentor. And also his inevitable downward spiral is, again, one of the most interesting aspects of the movie. Also currently drinking is Uebayashi, who is a great villain. His bloodthirsty ways, he actually acts like more like an animal or something, like he doesn't care about anything. He just wants revenge and blood, and he's willing to do anything to make it happen. And he is soon revealed as a true sociopath, and he manages to stand out in the worst way, even scaring his own Yakuza partners. Okay, so the characterization is truly great and also benefits the most by Tori Matsuzaka and Ryohei Suzuki's acting. Both of them are really tall also, which is very interesting. They're tall, handsome, and they're complete opposite to each other. And the whole thing, how it unfolds, is really interesting and also a pleasure to watch. But Shiraishi also deals with a number of other aspects. For example, the corruption of the police and their ties with their Yakuza, who the latter also are presented as having connections with the government. And also the way that Yakuza is acting right now, we have seen that in a couple of lately current movies about Yakuza, because they seem to have reinvented themselves as businessmen. They are not so violent anymore because the anti-Yakuza law has restricted them significantly, but they have still managed to make money in different unlawful ways. Okay, the whole thing is it's great. The story and the characters is pretty great to unfold, but unfortunately, the usual issue of modern Japanese movies is still present here, since the movie is too long, and there is again a point, there is a finale where when you watch, you will probably say, oh, okay, that's great finale, but then, as usual in Japanese movies, unfortunately, there are a couple of more finales or something like that, which do not work as well. And I really do not understand why they keep doing that. I guess maybe they need to find the specific duration, but in terms of story, usually it doesn't make sense. And also, apart from the two protagonists, the ones that stand out in terms of acting are Nishiro Murakami as Kota, who has also emerged as a really good actor lately, and particularly the way he's presented as a sheep among wolves is probably one of the most interesting aspects of the narrative. And also interesting is the role of Baijaku Nakamura as Takayuki, who seems kind and innocent and weak, but this is not the case because he's cunning and intelligent and quite effective. To synopsize, I would say, okay, the film is pretty good, but I think the first one was a bit better, also because Koji Yakuso was in it. So both protagonists are great, but they are not Koji Yakuso. Okay, and I guess that's it about the movie. All right, Rhythm, would you like to say something about your choice?
Yeah, sure. So one of the films that I saw, which I was very excited for, was The Book of Fish by director Lee Junik. This was a film, a historical, and Lee Junik is someone who does historicals very well, but this was the first time that he was no, not the first time, the second time that he was collaborating with Sol Kyung-gu, another favorite actor of mine. So I was looking forward to it very much. Anyway, the story is about a real historical character. It begins at the death of King Jongju, following which child King Sunjo ascends the throne, and the Dowager Queen becomes the de facto ruler of Joseon. Among her first rulings is to launch an attack on the Catholics, the followers of the so-called Western evil, who are declared traitors of the nation and Confucian ideologies. Chief among those are the Jong family, consisting of the brothers Jong Yak-jong, Jong Yak-jun, and Jong Yak-yong. While the first one is killed, the other two brothers are exiled in far-off places, with Yak-jon being sent to a remote Black Mountain island. Over there, Yak-jon is taken in by a kindly widow who respects his noble high-ranking position and also comes across local fisherman Jang Changde, the most well-read on the island, who has an unusually vast knowledge of marine creatures and plants. Changde dreams of for studying far more, but getting a reputable for him, Yakjong should be opportune arrive. Jangde considers him a traitor to the throne and to Confucian doctrines. However, when Yakjong, most impressed by the fisherman's marine knowledge, decides to write an encyclopedia on the marine life around the Black Mountain Island, the two realize that they have a mutually beneficial relationship for them, and the teacher and student relationship soon begins to develop. So this subject matter that Lee Junik has selected is an interesting one for me, because the character of Yakjun, his brother is Yak-yong, who is one of the greatest scholars of that period. So a lot of the biopics would select his story to tell, but Lee Junik chooses to focus on this one. And what happens with this is that you not only get a story about a character that you maybe don't know a lot about, but there's still a very interesting story to find. But with that, you also get the story of the more popular brother in an abridged version. The film also talks about many themes. Obviously, the whole idea of religion versus knowledge, and old religion, new religion, your Confucian values, all of that comes into play. And there's also the fact of you being a noble birth or a lowborn. That's also something, and how that affects your life decisions and your life choices, the paths that you take in life. All of that is covered as well. I think the film also talks about change, which is a big part of the whole narrative, because for both the characters, this one comes from a very noble family, and he's asked to adapt to the ways of the small village and to the ways of the fishermen, and to go out into the sea and study the marine life on the little boat with the fisherman. For Changde, on the other hand, this is about accepting things that he believes to be not right, things that he has been told since a very young age that these are not the right ways in life, to be open to them, to be accepting of them. And as their story progresses, those whole changes come into play for both the characters, which I think is very interesting. And obviously the whole film is shot beautifully. The cinematography is completely black and white, but the locations, the set designs, the costumes, even in that monochrome color, is just beautiful to look at. Right from the first shot to the very last shot of the film, I think it's just, even if you're not into the story very much, if you're not into historicals to begin with, I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful film to just watch and have that experience of looking at the monochrome images, which is fantastic. And obviously the actors, the two big actors in that are amazing. Sol Kyung-gu, like I said, is a fantastic actor. I think this is his first historical in this long career, which when I realized it, I couldn't believe it, but it's still true, and he does a great job with it. I think he takes the whole historical aspect and he uses the natural charisma he has to give his character a very noble look and a noble feel. Simultaneously, Byun Yo-han, he plays Changde, and he obviously is a very lively actor usually, but he plays it quite well over here, plays it understated, keeps his character not, even though he's of a low birth, or at least he believes himself to be, he has this way of composing himself, a way of carrying himself that feels a bit different, that feels a bit regal in front of the obviously the noble person that has just come to the village. All in all, I think it's a very beautiful film to look at. It tells you a story which you don't know. I'm not even sure if many Korean people themselves knew of this story, because I'm sure they've read the book of Fish, which the character goes on to write. But the story behind him actually getting to writing that book is something that probably not many people knew. So yeah, definitely a good story in there. Could have been a little bit shorter, I think, because in the latter half, in the final, maybe 20 minutes or something, the character goes in a different journey of his own that maybe is something that takes the story slightly off the tracks, but ultimately it brings it back quite well for a very well-rounded picture, I think.
Lee Junik has perfected the biopic, right?
Oh, totally. He loves a good biopic, and I'm glad he does them, because I don't think anybody does them as well. He tried something, and with the biopic and the historical as well, because his film, The King and the Clown, is one of my favorite Korean films. And he does it so well, and to take the historical and to make it a biopic, I think it's a very good combination for him that just works.
Okay. And Don, what are you going to talk us about?
Okay, so the one I'm going to do is called The Prayer from Men Kyu Dong. So it's a futuristic Korea society where a group of robots known as TRS are assigned to care for elderly patients in their dying days. And it concerns, there's two separate storylines. One involves a woman who comes home from her career abroad to care for her elderly mother who's just put into the service, and depicts the various struggles of trying to keep herself together while battling with the thought that her mother's about ready to die, even though the machine that's there to help ease her into death is trying to both care for her and care for the mother. And there's a separate storyline involving a family that's visits the hospital where the mother's staying, that is basically trying to come to terms with the fact that the robot that they used for their mother is obsolete and unprepared and basically can't handle the surmounting stress, because you pay for the service and you upgrade the machine to care for the symptoms and functions of the individual person, but not every robot is equipped with the same features and functions as everybody else. So basically what it is it's a class warfare system between being rich enough to afford this service, but not being able to come to terms with the grips of losing your parents. Whereas the second one is basically, I can't afford the care, this is the best we can do, and everything just falls to hell around them. So basically, it's not really something that I would really seek out myself to watch, but I kind of enjoyed it. It adds this bleak and oppressive atmosphere where everything is just dark and where everything is like a really bright gray, bluish gray tone. And you're in a hospital, so you're automatically forced with the prospect of dying and death, and just being just like dreary and bland and stuff like that. But then you have all of the the uniforms with the various caregivers, and everybody's very quiet and somber and respectful. So it's basically just analyzing the two various families that one can afford the care, one can't, and how everything comes to grips around it. So it's not necessarily, like I said, one that I would usually go out of my way to watch, but I kind of enjoyed it. It's it's a fun 80 minutes, if I can say that. So it's not one that overstays its welcome. It's not, this, overly long, drawn out kind of affair that I typically see with Korean films that, border on 2 hours when there's no reason to. So if I can say it's a fun 80 minutes, I can definitely give you that. Basically, like I said, it's a really kind of just depressing and bland kind of like drab kind of a film. And it's basically just going back and forth between the two. They're both played by the same person, Lee Yu-young. One of the features of the service that they provide is the fact that the robot is designed to look like one of the family members that they're supposed to care for, which was, supposed to help ease the transition by being around a familiar face, essentially. So she plays both roles. When she's in her robot stage, it's, just like blank stone face. She has, various conversations with other robots and other caregivers in her profession, just like her. And they're just completely blank, stone faced, like, well, I saw her expire. She, passed away at like 12 o'clock this afternoon. But it's all done with the casualness of just sitting together with your friends discussing last night's, reality TV show. So there's basically like this weird disconnect where you're talking about, the fatality and the finality of death in just like a casual kind of a conversation. So when she's, as the regular, the human person, the human version of her that's come home to care for her, she's very frazzled. She's very just, on the brink all the time, just, like overloaded with stress and guilt. And it's a, interesting dynamic to compare the two, especially when you get, the secondary storyline with that other family involved, where everything is just going wrong. The caregiver doesn't know CPR correctly because they weren't able to pay for the functionality of their caregiver to know that. So they, the family has to step in when they're ill, when the ill, starts choking, whereas the robot is just completely unprepared for it. And you see like the comparisons and the contrasting between the two, and it's an intriguing film, if I can say that. Not necessarily one that I would seek out, but if it intrigues you, I would definitely give it a watch, because it's a very well made film. very strong, very strong grays, very strong stylistic choices. And it's an intriguing commentary on social commentary and, wealthy, the state of wealth in society. So, like I said, if it intrigues you, go for it. Not necessarily one that I would recommend to casual film goers, but if it intrigues you, go for it.
Okay. Okay. And Don, what do you think about this kind of latest trend that there are a lot of horror or thriller movies that are filled with a social commentary lately?
It's kind of a mixed breed. I'm certainly I'm certainly not all that opposed to it. Watching as much American stuff as I do, it's certainly something that I'm familiar with. I mean, I can cite numerous examples of American genre fare that would touch on even more hot button issues than what this one does. So it's not necessarily something I'm all that opposed to. I would probably be much more familiar with it if I knew going in. Like if you just gave me a blank film and stated, okay, here, watch this. And then at the end of it say, okay, what did you think of the commentary on such and such? 99 times out of 100, I wouldn't be able to tell you if there was. I'm not that kind of a film goer where I'm completely aware of it unless it's so obvious that, it hits you with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Even if you would, no matter where it falls on the line with what it's trying to bring awareness to, if it's very obvious and it's very blatant, I might pick it up. But if it's like very subtle and underneath the radar and not necessarily something that, if I'm just casually watching it, I wouldn't expect me to pick it up. That's just the sort of film viewer I am. So if I'm aware of it going in, I can pay attention for it and I can answer your question that way. Whereas if you just give me a blank film and say, here, what did you think? I would probably look at you like a deer in the headlights if you told me there was social commentary.
Okay.
To answer your question on this one, yes, I was very aware because of the programming material provided for us said that was a very big part of what the film is. And I can definitely see where it's coming from, whereas you want to, the family is basically trying to keep themselves together at the time when they need it the most. Their patriarch or their mother or their father is about to die. So you want to be able to prepare for them and give them the best care that they can. But some families can't afford this caregiver, this particular brand of robot that they have in this storyline. Whereas you see the one family that doesn't necessarily have the means to support themselves around the robot. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and it's one that it drew me in when I was watching it. And that's one of the reasons why I found it as intriguing as it was. Where, I probably wouldn't have picked it up if they said that. I probably would have just picked it up as some bleak, depressing sci-fi film.
Okay.
But
okay.
Since I knew going in, I was very aware of what it was about and to pay attention for those aspects. So it really was a big factor for bringing me into it since I knew what it was about.
Okay. All right, great. So next film is Junkhead. It's in the stop motion animation, a Japanese one. It has a strange story in terms of production because this is the third edition of a film that started as a 30-minute short 7 years ago. And then it became a full feature, and now it has gotten its final edition version, let's say, which is more impressive than ever. The third with the second edition are not so different in terms of story or how the movie goes, but I think they worked a lot in terms of post-production and how the whole film works. It's directed by Takahide Wori, who also did storyboarding, wrote the film, designed it, did the lighting, shot it, made the costumes, the special effects, and even the voice. So it's really a one-man show, although there is a great side about the film. And if you see how they managed to create all those creatures that you see in it, you will be really impressed because they're actually models that they shot afterwards. They're not animated. So the story, it's it takes place in the distant future where mankind has attained longevity through gene manipulation. However, in exchange, the ability to reproduce is lost, and to maintain the dwindling workforce, clones were built, but 1200 years later, they rebelled and eventually inhabiting the lower depths of the world, because the world in the film is pretty layered. You will see that when you see the movie, how layered exactly that is. And the humans suddenly finding a need to understand their subterranean dwelling creations, launch an ecological study. What they discover is that the clones have transformed into a vast array of absurd and terrifying monstrosities, although the humans themselves have also changed significantly. And in that setting, the story revolves around one of those explorers who finds himself found by three strange creatures dressed in black and featuring intense bellies that get him to their boss, a doctor who transports his head into another body, with the whole team eventually starting calling the newly manufacturing creation God. And the film is God's Odyssey. I understand the oxymoron here, but that's what it is. And which does not stop here, since he soon finds himself roaming around the labyrinth of the underground, meeting new friends and foes, all the while trying to determine what exactly he's doing there, since his memory is repeatedly deleted. In his travels, he also meets the people of another lab who are dominated by extremely strong females, a man who tries to con him, another man who has been standing alone tending a fire forever, and a strange girl and her monstrous friend. Eventually, he becomes God again, and his true story is revealed, and he's reconnected with the three initial creatures in a battle against the worst monster of all. The story is funny, but it's pretty intriguing. It's filled with commentary and symbolism. Although, okay, the first thing one will notice after the gibberish-like talk everyone uses, they don't talk exactly. Essentially, the movie is silent. You just hear some strange sounds. They are voice acted, but they don't make sense. You need to have subtitles to understand what is going on. But what is more impressive is that the creations of the characters and the creatures look like a combination of Giger, Hieronymus Bosch, and the kind of creatures usually found in survival horror video games like Resident Evil, which the film occasionally actually functions as one of those. It reminds of Resident Evil, the way the creatures runs inside the corridors trying to fight or avoid enemies. And as I mentioned, the characters are actually built models and they are not CGI, which is really the most impressive aspect of the movie. Highlights also the amazing craftsmanship and the imagination of Takahide Hori and his crew. And the same applies to the overall setting, which is a combination of dystopian and cyberpunk elements, which results in a never-ending labyrinth of sorts, which is also very impressive. Also, the whole way the narrative unfolds looks like an animated version of Tetsuo, because God is running frantically through corridors hunted by monsters, all the while extreme industrial and noise music is playing in the background. And frequently the film transforms into an extreme music video filled with gore and blood. There are some slower moments where Takahide allows his audience to admire the setting and the characters, and also they feature a lot of humor, symbolism, iconoclastic elements regarding the modern society, and also comments about God, religion, human nature. Actually, the narrative is pretty deep. And I feel this is one of the, okay, when I first saw it, I think it was, I don't remember if it was 2017 or 2019. I thought it was one of the best movies of the year, but this edition is even better. And it has already gained some awards in European festivals. I think it got one from Strasbourg a couple of days ago, and it's a truly impressive film. Okay, that's it from me. Rhythm, your next film?
Right. So the next film that I will talk briefly about is also one that I was really looking forward to. It's the new film by Ryu Seung-wan. It's called Escape from Mogadishu. And obviously Ryu Seung-wan is somebody who does great action films. So his films are usually to look forward to, and they get a very wide release. I think most of his recent films have been released in the States and stuff. So, he's somebody who gets a lot of love from the Western audience as well. Story for this one is pretty simple. It's set in the 1990s, where both the Koreas are struggling to get membership at the UN General Embassy. And so they've both taken places of prominence in Mogadishu, in the capital of Somalia. And this country holds a very deciding vote, an important vote that could get them membership. So both the countries are lobbying for it. For South Korea, it is Ambassador Han Sing-sung, who is played by Kim Yoon-suk, and his North Korean counterpart is Rim Young-soo, who is played by Ho Jun-ho. And they both have their counselors, Kang Dae-jin and Tae Jun-ki, respectively. And they are both trying to get the upper hand over each other. While this is happening, a civil war erupts in the country. So holed within their embassies and cut off from electricity, communication, or security, the people of both the countries must put their differences aside and unite to escape the battlefield that the city has become. Of course, it's a Ryu Seung-wan film, so one thing that he never fails to do is, he entertains his audience, and I think Escape from Mogadishu is no different. He does this by not really focusing on world politics or any of those things. He sets the stage with the world politics for his characters, but that's about as deep as it goes. And after that, it's all about the situations around our characters, which are, by the way, done really, really well, effectively, and very realistically. And it's just about how these characters then escape and find a way out of their own situations. It's also this, while this tension is going on, Ryu Seung-wan still keeps things going, and he does this with a number of action sequences, which are, as expected from a Ryu Seung-wan, fantastically done. And, you have everything from riot scenes, tense standoffs, car chase sequences, which are just amazing. They can rival some of the best out there. Scenes where the South Koreans come face to face with the Somalian police, filled with tension, really good stuff there. The action set pieces, edited well, shot beautifully, that helps the whole atmosphere of the sequences. The editing keeps them precise, on point, and keeps the audience involved in them and keeps them frantic throughout. My biggest issue with this film was, you just can't escape this sort of a feeling that it feels a bit exploitative of the situation in Somalia. It's a very dark period for the country, one that the country still hasn't fully recovered from, and it doesn't really do anything to address that aspect of it, really. Instead, some of the Somalian characters are very typecasted, very caricaturish, which really undermines the whole the situation that these people actually had to go through. But apart from that, if you put that one to the side, and it's something that is a bit hard to put aside completely, it's just a roller coaster ride throughout. As soon as the action sequences start, your eyes are like that. Wow. The car chase sequence that I spoke of earlier, Particularly the one that comes near the climax of the film is it is amazingly shot, very tense, very, very well executed. The camera, the cinematography is great. It follows you from one car to the other in a seemingly single cut. And then when it does cut, it is edited pristinely to keep the audience in the whole situation. I think overall it has some issues, as I mentioned, with the whole situation and how it feels a bit exploitative of it. But other than that, I think it's a very entertaining film. The acting, well, obviously you've got Kim Yoon-sik, one of the biggest stars of the country. He has this role. His character starts off as a normal ambassador, this wheeler dealer sort of a character, but then has to step up on the mantle and has to become a hero in his own right. Kim Yoon-sik takes the character through this amazing journey. You have Jo In-sung, who's again a very good actor, teaming up with Kim Yoon-sik for the first time. They've both been working for a while now. This is the first time that the two actors are playing together in the same film. Play off each other very well, because they too have a number of scenes together, working very close to each other as confidants and whatnot. So, obviously there's this camaraderie that the two share, which is very well depicted on the screen. And you also have Ho Jun-ho, veteran actor of many, many years, also teaming up with Kim Yoon-sik for the first time. There's these few scenes in there which Ryu Seung-wan also had in his previous film, The Battleship Island, which are a bit jingoistic in format, which I am not a big fan of. But, with the subject matter that it can't be helped, I suppose. There's the scene at the dinner table in the South Korean embassy that after a point I was just cringing really hard at. But so you put those aside, and otherwise the action sequences, the acting, the glorious action pieces, I think makes Escape from Mogadishu a pretty entertaining, fun film. Not one of the best of Ryu Seung-wan's filmography, or of any of the actors for that matter. But still one that remains among the better films that NIAF put out this year.
Okay, great. And Don, your last one?
All right. The last film that I saw would be Raging Fire, which is the final film from director Benny Chan, who I believe he passed away shortly after it was completed. I know it was sometime in post-production, but I believe it was at least completed under his supervision, if I remember. I can't. I know the date, but I can't remember where that fell in the production quality. I believe it was already completed when he did pass away. But the story concerns a cop named Shan, who's played by Donnie Yen, who's on the case trying to discover this illegal weapons cache that's been stolen, and comes to find out that one of the participants in the cache that was stolen is his former protege, a man called No, played by Nicholas C., who was actually on the police force with them several years earlier, until an incident led to No being incarcerated for several years, as well as several other members of the police force who have now become part of No's gang of super criminals who are using their police training to launch attacks on the underworld in order to become the new gun runners, drug runners, criminal group, whatever you want to call them. So it's basically then a back and forth kind of cat and mouse game of trying to catch them in the act and bring them to justice. I really got to say, for those of you that know Benny Chan, you'll know that he basically does not skimp out on the action scenes, and this one is really quite full of them. There's several big high quality set pieces. There's a three-way shootout inside of a abandoned mall, using the various tiers and escalators and walkways as entry points to try to gain upper hand. It's a lot of fun, and this is early on in the film. So it gives you a really fantastic intro. There's a couple car chases, basically, you know, on the roof of the car, trying to shoot at fleeing vehicles in opposite lanes, trying to weave traffic at the same time. And the finale is a fantastic brawl between Yen and Chai. It takes place inside of a church, so you're basically not using a lot of the surroundings as much. It's just a hard-hitting, everyone takes haymakers, and sometimes they land, sometimes they don't. It allows the other guy to get the upper hand, so it's a lot of fun. You also get a fantastic storyline involving the connection between Shen and Yo. Basically, what happens is No was involved in a drug sting several years earlier, and inadvertently beats an informant to death under Shan's watch. But during the preceding trial to investigate whether he had complied to use appropriate force in the incident, Shan disobeyed his group and said that yes, he'd used too much force in detaining the suspect, and basically sent No and the group away to jail for several years. And now he's come out, now that he's free again, he's determined to use the training, not just to rule the criminal underworld, but to strike back at Shen and just rub the success in his nose and say, you know, this is what you did, this is what you made me, you know, take that, sort of a thing. And it's a really interesting dynamic because, you know, there's no mystery as to who's doing this. Everybody knows what's going on from the very beginning. It's basically just, you know, Shan realizing that No is using the police tactics and training to try to stop him, and whether or not he's up to the task of completing it. So you get a really interesting dynamic there that you don't really necessarily get in a lot of modern action movies, because usually it's the police detective and his partner that you get the really big, you know, the strong connection with, which you do get shades of that here, where Shan puts together a task force to try to stop what's going on. But most of these just basically amount to sitting around in the police force, just looking over the evidence cases with the blackboard filled up with photos and crime scene investigation reports and stuff like that. So to get a criminal police officer relationship like this is really kind of interesting, and it adds a fun layer to the film that kind of keeps it going along throughout its running time. I do have to say that can make the film drag a little in the second half, where they're basically, everybody knows it's No. Everybody is very aware that No is the one that's doing everything. But it's, you know, this sort of like, I equate it kind of like the early James Bond films where he meets the villain and has dinner with him. And there's like a cordial relationship between the two, that there's like a sense of respect. You know, both sides know what's going on, but they're not willing to fire the first bullet. Essentially, they're waiting for the other one to make the first move and retaliate. And you get like that kind of like back and forth relationship between the two of them. So it can kind of drag at times. There's also this really odd storyline set piece in the third act, just before we get to the finale, where Shan is investigated by internal affairs for one of the incidents, and it's supposed to tie into what happened earlier between Shan and No several years previously, as sort of like a metaphor on police brutality and like the bureaucracy and red tape and passing all of that kind of stuff. But it just feels tacked on, and it just adds nothing to the film. It's dropped almost immediately after it's brought up. You know, they send Shan out to just stop him no matter what, even though he's being investigated by IA for, you know, police brutality issues. So it seems incredibly weird to just throw that in at the very end out of nowhere and just, you know, wipe it away several minutes later. But for those of you that have followed the work of any of the main three principals in the film, Donnie Yen, Nicholas Tay, and Benny Chan, you're going to have a highlight with this. Like I said, the action scenes are pulse pounding and very enjoyable. The setup between everybody is pretty intriguing, and generally it's a very, very strong film. I haven't seen all of Chan's work, so I can't say where it falls on his filmography. But from the ones I've seen, it's up near the top. So it's a very strong film to go out on, and I'm really glad that he was able to deliver something like this and put a high mark out as his final film.
What always never fails to impress me in those Hong Kong action films is how much punishment the policemen get in those films. I mean, in other films, they don't get punished so much, you know, they don't get killed, they don't suffer that much. But in Hong Kong action, okay, this is Chinese now, but essentially the style is Hong Kong, they really get their share of punishment. There's sometimes even more than the actual criminals, you know. And I guess in Raging Fire, it's the same thing. Really?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The way that the police are treated, oh my God, man. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it for this episode also. We're gonna continue doing this, either you like it or not. We're gonna get better at it. This is just the first time that we're doing it in this way. We hope we can add more people and have a more general coverage of other festivals. But we're gonna go this path for the next episodes. So thank you very much for being here. If you like these things, you can also subscribe to our channel, and we're gonna have at least one every week. And see you later. Thank you for being here. Bye.
Later.
Bye.